Manisha Tomar. I have secured All India rank 94 in Civil Services 2019, and I'm here to talk about my journey. I would like to share some tips and tricks that helped me to clear the exam this year, and I hope that they are of some use to you. So I would like to talk a little about myself. I first came to know about the examination when I was in class 5th, and I was very intrigued by the idea of the exam, but somewhere along the journey I forgot about this idea. So I have done my BTech in IT. So in my last year of engineering, while I was looking at different options, the idea of this came back, and so I decided to pursue. I came back home, I told my parents, they were very supportive of the idea, and so I started my journey, and today I am here with rank 94. So my parents have been a huge support in this whole journey, and there are a few pointers that I would like to give before I start talking about the examination. So one of the few things that I have heard aspirants ask me is that, ma'am, we are not very confident that will we be able to compete with all the IITians and all the people from IIM. So I would like to say that please be very confident in yourself. You don't have to fall into the trap of that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. We are all good enough, and with hard work we can all do it. So that is one. Secondly is that this exam requires a lot of patience and perseverance. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. It's a long journey, so please be patient. And thirdly, I would say that try and stay away from all the distractions. So Instagram and Facebook and all of this can wait. You know, there will be ample time to do all this. So before you start, keep these pointers in mind, and then start your journey. So let's start talking about the examination. So I'm going to talk about what I did, and you take whatever suits you and do that. So this is my strategy. It may work for you, it may not. So please take it with a pinch of salt, and let's start. So my first and foremost thing that I did was, I used to keep the syllabus with me whenever I used to study, and at this point my syllabus is in complete tatters, because I used to note down all the topics that used to come in the newspaper, and then I used to write it alongside all the articles. So what that did was, it kept my preparation on track, so that I don't veer away from what I'm supposed to read. So that is one thing that helped me throughout the preparation. So that is one thing that I used to do, and refer it almost on a daily basis. Second thing that I did was, I used to keep the previous year question papers handy all the time. So keep referring it like as and when required, so that again it keeps the preparation on track, so that we know what to read, what not to read, and we don't go off track. Apart from that, solving previous year question papers helped me a lot, because this is the mistake that I made in my first attempt, wherein I was reading absolutely everything and not focusing on revision, not focusing on what was required for the examination point of view, and just reading everything under the sun. And I paid for it, because I did not get selected in the first attempt. I scored 102, wherein the cutoff was 105. So in my next attempt, I tried to correct that, and I referred the previous year question papers, and that definitely helped me, and it helped me in this attempt as well. So I would say, do reverse engineering, that is very beneficial. Go backwards, go through the question papers, and then figure out what to read and what not to read. So that would be one thing. And another mistake that I made was that first attempt, lot of passive studying. So active recall is something that helped me a lot. While reading the newspaper, trying and figuring out what is it that I read yesterday or last week, just jotting down on the newspaper itself. So at this point I have 3 thick registers of just my current affairs because of all the active recall. So that really helped me as well. So I think that would be a great thing if somebody can do that. And coming to mains, I have also written mains in my second attempt, but I made some major blunders that I realized only after I wrote mains. So my marks were 768 and the cutoff for general that year was 774. So I had a little hope after I wrote mains that maybe I clear it, but after I got my marks, I realized that there were some major blunders that I had made. So some of the things that I had ignored was ethics, and I had also ignored essay, because when I was younger I had I had given a few essay competitions and I had won a few awards and stuff. So I used to think that I am very good at essays. But in this examination, nothing can be actually taken for granted, because everything has to be prepared separately. And this is what I realized after I got my marks. So in this attempt, I made sure that I don't repeat those mistakes. So even though I wrote only about 4 or 5 essays, but I tried to improve. And by improvement I mean that in an essay what we require is a lot of structuring. So I worked on that. Again, with ethics, we feel that ethics is something that we can all do. I don't know where that comes from, but we feel that we can read and we can do, but it is far from true, because ethics is also something that has to be prepared in detail. It's not a lot of reading, but it's a lot of I'll say answer writing. So if we have a good emotional intelligence, I think that reflects on the paper. So for ethics, what I did this year was that I referred a few previous year toppers' answer sheets. Specifically, Meenal ma'am's answer sheets. She was AIR 35. So her answers were brilliant. So that helped me to realize the standard of answers that are actually required in the examination. So once I did that, then that helped me. And one thing more I'll say for ethics is that what we do is we write ethics answers with our brains, so very logically. But ethics answers have to be slightly written from the heart, I feel. So if that can be done, I think our scores can be raised slightly. So that is another thing that I tried this year. Now once the marks will come, I'll be able to guide better and tell better, but currently this is what I think. And of course optional, I tried to raise my score this time. So let's see if that worked or not. So these were the few things that I tried to improve this time. Another thing that I made the mistake of in my previous attempts was that I used to focus too much in prelims on my marks in the mock tests that I was giving. So initially I was not scoring very well, like I would get 70s and 80s, and I was very obsessed with those marks. So instead of analyzing what went wrong, I would be very sad about the marks, which I think is not a very good way to go about it, since prelims is also around the corner. So I think the focus should be on analysis of what has gone wrong. So if there is a question, what I used to do was that in this attempt especially, that I would figure out that if there's a question, what is it that I was thinking while I answered it, and why did I choose that specific option, and where did I go wrong? Was it the fact that was wrong, or was it the logic that I applied? Was it the technique? Because we have multiple techniques, we have elimination, we have the fact, and we have all these techniques. So once I was able to think like this, I think I figured out how to answer. So this year I did around 95 questions, and 64 to 65 are correct. So that has put me in the safe zone. So my accuracy is not that high, but this is how I used to solve my papers. So and this has been the trend for these 3 prelims that I have taken. So this has been my broad thing for prelims and mains. Now this year the mains questions were also slightly tricky. So there's this one question in mains that I would like to personally discuss, so that I can give an idea of how to go about thinking about the mains question. So it has also been a slightly controversial question this year, but this is my understanding. Now if it could help someone, I think that would be great. So the question was, what are the challenges to our cultural practices in the name of secularism? Now according to me, and this is what I wrote in the examination, the intent of the examiner to ask this question was to figure out that as an aspirant, what is your understanding of Indian secularism? Now if we go back to the basic idea of Indian secularism, we will understand that it provides a proper space for all cultural practices and religions to peacefully coexist. So now the question of it being a challenge does not arise. So according to me, in this question, we basically had to defend Indian secularism, and that is what I have done. So and as an aspirant, I think we should not get trapped in these ideas, and that is what was required. And then further take examples of say triple talaq or Sabrimala, and then explain that there are other issues in those issues such as like women empowerment and equality, and then go from there. So if you understand the question, it becomes much easier to answer, and then of course the marks will reflect that. So once the mark sheet comes, it will be better to analyze. So this is the question, and this is about the question paper. Now moving on, I think the next thing that is a question in that we struggle with our test series. So how do we maximize the use of test series? So personally, if there is one thing that I think that we must put our effort in, I would say the single most important thing is the test series. Personally, I took test series in both my mains attempt, and the best way to do a test series is to try and prepare, of course, but let's face it, we have very less time, especially for mains. So we are unable to prepare properly, so we have to give tests. But what is more important is try and understand the mistakes that you are making. Do not, and I repeat this again, do not get hung up on your marks. Just don't bother about who is coming first. I personally, for once, I never topped any test series. I am being very honest. So I used to get decent marks both in prelims and mains. So prelims I used to get somewhere 95 to 100, and in my actual prelims I have scored more than 105. So I am a living testimony of the fact that in the actual exam you can score more. And even in mains, I used to score 100 plus, but I am sure that in the actual exam I have scored more. So don't get hung up on marks, but just keep trying to improve. Figure out where you've gone wrong and try and work on that. So that your focus should be on that, right? And everything else will follow. Marks will follow, right? So don't worry about that. Then the second thing that I figured out early on was that we should focus on our strengths. So I knew that polity was my strength because my optional was public administration. So I read a lot of polity anyway. So I used to make sure that no polity question would go wrong. And my geography was slightly weak, and to be completely honest, it is still slightly weak. So I would avoid geography questions if at all possible. So that was my personal strategy. And current affairs, I would try and answer all the questions, because I used to follow the newspaper every day and religiously try to do all the inside questions also, like the quiz questions that come. So if that is something that you could do, try and figure out your own strengths and weaknesses. I think that would be a wonderful thing, and that will help in the long run also, both for prelims and mains. And that is a potential question, in fact, in interview also. They can ask you your strengths and weaknesses. So I think that helps. Apart from that, for mains, I'll say, of course, don't jump into answer writing. Do reverse engineering here also, because this is a mistake that I made. So I'll tell you what I did. My first answer I wrote on India-Nepal relations. And even now when I read it, I cringe slightly, because it is such a horrible answer. So what you do is go through previous year answer sheets of previous toppers and figure out what they have actually written. So what happens is that we get an idea of what is required of us and what is the standard that will actually get us into the list. So this attempt, that is what I did. I went through Meenal ma'am's papers, of course. I also looked at other toppers' answer sheets, and that is how I understood that what do I have to write in order to get those kind of marks. So that really helps. And I'll give you a broad idea of what I did in my mains answer. So structure is very important, of course, because it makes it easier for the paper checker to go through the answer sheet. So in mains, what we do is we have an introduction, we have a proper body, and then a conclusion. And the body can very easily be divided into what the issue is and then a solution, like reforms. Reforms can further be divided into structural reforms, policy reforms, right? So if you divide the answer like this, it becomes very pleasing to the eyes also. It shows that you have a very logical and an analytical mind. It's very easy to read and easy to check. So, and you can give a lot of points also in this format. So this is exactly what I did. All of my questions were in point format. So I have not written anything in the form of a paragraph, except of course the essay. So of course I keep saying this, once the marks come, I'll be able to tell better, but this is what I followed for almost all the answers. So next I'd like to talk about time management. As far as time management goes, I'll tell you about my beginning. I, for one, struggled the most with time management. First means horrible at time management. All my tests could never complete any test. So in fact in ethics, till the last test did not complete the test. So at that point I did not know what I will do, but somehow I managed to complete all my papers. But I'll tell you what I did in my mains. I missed the introduction, I missed the conclusion, and I wrote all my papers completed. But then that is how I got my marks. My mark sheet is, previous year mark sheet is available on Quora. You can see my marks. That is what you will get if you miss the intro and conclusion. But then I figured out that this is no way to go about, so I have to increase my speed. So this year what I did was that for all these different types of questions, I prepared an intro and a conclusion beforehand. So now how I did that? I went through the syllabus and I identified the broad topics, and then I went on to Mrunal's website. So he has given some broad topics and broad introductions. I saw the template and then I made my own introductions based on that. And since I had these already, I practiced them in test series, and that is what I did. So when the mains paper actually came, I just picked them up, wrote them and saved my time. So now that my introduction and the conclusion was ready, so I only had to write the body. and that saved my time, and that is how I was able to complete the papers. Even in this attempt, the ethics papers was not able to complete all of them because I tend to write a lot, but the mains paper, because I had practiced so much, I was able to write. So this would be my trick to complete the papers. Prepare beforehand. Again, I'll repeat this, in this examination, nothing should be left to chance, because if you leave anything, it can cost you an attempt, which can be very painful. So don't repeat the mistakes that I did. If there is one thing that you take away from this, is that learn from my mistakes, and if it saves you an attempt, I will think that, you know, my job here is done. So do this, prepare it beforehand, practice it. Another thing that you can do is, towards the end of the examination, what happens is that we are not left with a lot of time. So the last question is the one that usually suffers. So what I used to do is, last question, one simple diagram, brief intro, brief conclusion. That will happen only once the diagram is already prepared. So I had a few diagrams that I had already prepared beforehand. One was for public policy, and another one was for geography. There were a few like this. I'll put them on Quora. You can check them out if you want. And so if they fit somewhere in the mains paper, so I would do that. One I think I wrote also in my optional paper, I believe. So that helps in saving time. So these are a few tips and tricks that you can do for time management. Apart from that, I think I would like to conclude just by saying that we are asked this question, that how do you motivate yourself and how do you sustain? Since my journey has been for 3 long years, so I'm usually asked, how did you sustain yourself and all of that. I'll say motivation is very fleeting. It comes and goes. Some days I was highly motivated, some days I felt extremely low. So for me, what really worked was, one was my family support. So never once did my family say, what are you doing, or you know, why don't you try something else. They were very, very supportive, and I think I would give all the credit to my mother. She helped me a lot. She was my pillar of strength. So I think in times like this, you must find your strength in your family, in your well-wishers. They don't have any evil intentions. They are the only ones who can, you know, provide you that kind of support. And secondly, I would say is that motivation is fleeting and discipline remains. So if you can build a sort of a routine, a sort of a discipline, that is something that will stay with you. So try and work on that. Of course, those who have their prelims right now, please don't deviate from it, focus on that. But those who are preparing for the long term, there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. So I would highly recommend it. No joke, it really did change my life. So if you would like to read it, it's a very good book. And I would just like to say that if I could do it, you can do it. Don't fall into the trap of, you know, that I'm not good enough. Everybody can do it, and I'd like to wish you all a very, all the best. And if anybody would like to contact me, I'm always there. I would love to help you. So all the best, and God willing, you'll all make it. Thank you so much.